Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, bringing you another great episode. We have Mr. Roger Burnett coming on with us from Social Good Promotions, and we're going to talk a lot about competitive differentiation. We're going to talk about, it's not even a need anymore today, it's a must. So really pay attention to this, pay attention to that part, pay attention to the part about being congruent. We're talking about the continuum now of really how rapport, like, know, love, trust, all those good factors are really playing far more into the sales process and how you've got to use these in your marketing side before you even get there today. So it's a really cool interview. I really believe you'll get so much out of this. Get a pen, paper, digital pad, whatever it is that you do today. Take good notes. And without further ado, let's go talk to Roger. Roger, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I'm really grateful to have you here.
I'm grateful to be here, man. It's exciting. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's talk to the people.
All right, let's talk to the people. Now, for those of you listening, Roger and I combined, we just have traveled, I think in the last week, about 9,300 miles. I added it up, Roger. So we're a little jet lagged, road lagged, whatever. So here we go. I'm really excited. I mean, your company is called Social Good Promotions.
Yes, sir.
And I want to get into that in a minute. But the reality is we have something that we need to talk about, which is competitive differentiation, which I think a lot of companies, I don't even know if they know really what the real crux of that is. I mean, it's one of those things that people go, oh yeah, I got to be competitively differentiated. But then when I look from afar into their companies, and I'm sure you might have that same situation happen, they're not competitively differentiated at all. They're a little different, but they're not really competitively differentiated. Can we delve into that? Like, what would you call competitive differentiation?
Yeah, that right. Those words, when put together in a sentence, it's kind of like this notion of people buying from people they know, like, and trust. Like everyone's sort of just, yeah, that's a universal truth. Competitive differentiation is what makes you what people choose when they're choosing. Really, when it boils down to is there's only one low cost provider in whatever is being sold that you're selling. And for most of us, being the low cost provider is not really what we're choosing. We need to be able to justify the delta between our price and the low cost provider's price. And if you don't have a set of things that you can communicate to your prospect that would be the justification for the delta, then you don't have competitive differentiation, period. And for many people, when you ask them, like, well, what makes you stand out? They're going to say, my service delivery, right? Like, I take better care of people. Well, no, you don't. You really don't. So if it's not those things, then what is it? And what I believe has become true in this economy, more so than in previous economies, is people really want to know, what is it about you that if I give you my money, that I'm going to feel good about making that choice? That's really competitive differentiation in a nutshell.
So there's 3 points I'd love to bring up on this, because I think this is really important. When you're saying, lowest cost, well, firstly, anybody I have found can sell themselves out of business.
Yeah.
So do we really want to be the lowest cost? No. Right. And when we're competing just on cost, we're now a commodity.
Agreed.
So I'm coming back to this one. Second one is, when they say, well, I take care of my people better than other people. I take care of this, I take care of that. Isn't that what you're supposed to do anyways?
Generally speaking.
And I think one of the big things that is a challenge for most companies is when you ask that question, what is your competitive differentiation? They give you what they do, but not what really is the outcome for the client. So what is the benefit of being, let's just say, the lowest cost top provider of service? What is the outcome for the client? Right. So the outcome for the client is they have, I don't know, higher profitability, or they have something, right? I mean, so a lot of times when I'm talking with people about competitive differentiation, and I know this is a topic that we both love, it's one of those things that I hear all the time, what they do versus what they produce for the client.
Right.
Is that kind of a key in being competitively differentiated? And from your view, to be like, state what you're doing in the terms of what's the benefit, the outcome for the client, or is it something that can be more mechanical internally?
Either or both are true. It's knowing what it is that you're going to say when you get asked the question. That really is where most people struggle, right? So we spend a ton of time networking and trying to meet new people. And, invariably the question becomes like, well, what do you do? And people will jump right to the what and not the why. And for most of us, what we're really buying is the why, not the what. So if you can't reliably communicate the why, the what doesn't really matter. And in that dance that we do, right? So you ask me what it is that we do, and I say we make the world a better place. People are like, well, what does that mean? Right? And I can get into what that is, these things. See, I can never do this. It's over there. There we go. I do three things, but the reason people choose me is not for these three things. It's for what our business does when people make the choice to do that with us. And the further you are away from the genesis of your why, the harder it is for people to figure out whether or not they would want to choose you. So if you, as the founder, the leader, can't reliably communicate that, then what's the likelihood that your sales team is going to be able to carry that to market? And even worse, what you really want is each of your people on your team to be able to personally identify themselves with the why, so that when they're standing in front of that person, they can say, well, this is what we do. Here's why we do it. And here's why it's important to me. And man, I've spent a lot of time in front of and with people that are supposed to be able to do that, and they can't. Right. And it's such a problem. And it really, it manifests itself in things like, it's time to do the deal now. Why am I fighting with my client about the cost?
Yeah, really.
You did a good job of connecting it sooner to make them feel like they're going to be happy with making this purchase because you're the right choice for them.
Yeah, but like I'm looking at your screen when right next to you, your logo on your amazing your products, marketing and sales strategy, events that generate leads, et cetera, right? So if somebody doesn't have the why and they can't communicate that why, then they're going to come to a company that is a competitor of yours or even yours, and they're going to go, I just want a logo. And it's like, how much is the logo? Well, it's X. Well, geez, I can get it out on Fiverr for $3, $5, $10, right? So the real question then becomes, why do you want that logo? That's what I'm hearing from you, right?
Agreed.
And you and I are both educators, so I'm going into education mode here, because people who are listening, they listen to this podcast because they want to learn.
Yep.
So why is a really important question. And then do you also think or believe that after you ask them why, you get to be a 2-year-old and ask them why again?
Well, to me, it's that second and that third question that are really where the decision gets made to choose you or not, right? If we run into one another, you're going to do some research. You're going to go out and do what you do. You're going to go to LinkedIn. You're going to go to the web, whatever, however you investigate, you're going to do your investigation. And if I haven't been able to elegantly communicate via those channels the same thing that you heard from me in person, That's problem one. Problem two is if I can't figure out what it is about you that when I spend this extra money, that when someone challenges me on why I did that, I have to have a defense, because everyone's job is to get whatever it is that they're getting at the lowest cost they possibly can get it, or have a justification for why they didn't make that choice. And if you're not giving them that chance, then you run the risk of losing out on potential sales. So the third why, if you got the first why, good for you. Congratulations, you're better than most. If you have the second why, you're like in the 10%. You have a third one, you're 1%. Like there's very few organizations out there that really have that dialed into that degree. And when you run across a brand that has it, you can feel it almost immediately. It's in the energy of the people. It's in the way that they behave. It's in the service delivery that they create for you, because it's not something that they have to say like, this is what makes us special. It's just who we are and what we do. And when it's there, it's palpable. And when it's not, it's palpable.
100% agree. So all of you are listening. First, we're listening with and talking with Mr. Roger Burnett from Social Good Promotions, and this is good stuff. So Roger, normally we do this at the end of the podcast, but I can imagine there are people going, I want to talk to this guy. So how do they get a hold of you? I know we'll put it in the show notes, but how do they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm 50, so I'm the email guys. So roger@socialgoodpromotions.com is the fastest, easiest way to get a hold of us. But there's a way to book an appointment with us online at socialgoodpromotions.com. We're on most of the social media channels that all of us are on, except for TikTok. We have an account. I don't really use it, but so we're findable. We're eminently findable, but Roger at Social Good Promotions is going to be probably the fastest way to make that happen.
So listen up, all you Gen Y, Z, X, Q millennials, right? Even some of the millennials. So it's funny because, you and I are at that similar age, and I have my daughters are 21 and 23, and they always say, Dad, I always know if the person is over 40 or under 40, because if they're over 40, I get a phone call. Right. So while we're educating those of you who are younger than 40-ish, remember that's the traditionalists and the baby boomers still like to use communication tools that are not just messaging. So, and if you're not using those, you're going to lose money on sales if you want to go to that demographic. There are still people, Roger. I mean, I don't know if you run into them, but I do, who still only do business on the golf course or the tennis court, that type of thing. So
yeah, we are who we are. And a lot of times in my discovery process, one of the things that I will ask a prospect is, how do you like to be communicated with? So that I know, and I know you probably have this happen too. Like I'll have a message from someone and I'll think to myself, like, now, where were we having that conversation? Was it on Facebook Messenger? Was it a text? Like where? I got to find record of what we were talking about because I don't remember what we said.
Yes. Yes, very often I do that. And I don't know if this is just a generational thing for us, but if I talked with somebody a month ago, if I didn't put it into the notes, I'm dead. Right. In the water. So it's kind of, that's funny. I hate to say I'm getting older, but I start to feel it a little bit more.
Is what it is, man.
So here's the thing. If we don't ask those whys, you're not going to know. I agree with that. I also think their messaging is going to be askew at that point. Right. Yep. So, from training a lot in the sales, and helping people hire and manage, A-player teams, I find messaging's off all the time because they haven't asked those 3 whys. And so, when somebody comes and says, oh, I want training for my sales team or something like that, the first question I ask them is why? Right. Because they'll inevitably say something like, I want to increase my sales. So you don't really want training. You want to increase your sales, right? Why do you want to increase your sales? Well, I need better margins. Why don't you have better margins today? Could it be X? Could it be Y? And we start digging into that. And what we find out is training is actually not the problem. Their sales process is the problem. Leadership might be the problem. I had a sales manager one time that he was supposed to be training the people multiple times a week, didn't show up for 2 months. So that's a problem.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So are you finding messaging is off on people when they're trying to build that brand, be that brand, build the marketing side of their business, and they don't understand competitive differentiation on their own?
So the adage that every universal truth, people buy from people they know, like, and trust, right? So I don't think there's anyone listening to this that just said, I don't believe that to be true, right? It's a universal truth. But the problem with it is people don't know what it means, and they haven't broken it down into a set of activities for their sales team to accomplish to help them move themselves from know, like, to trust. A lot of people think it's a straight line. I believe it's a pyramid, and that you have to climb the steps on the pyramid from know to like to trust. And what most people don't recognize and appreciate is it's not a straight climb. You could start making your way up and realize, this isn't going to get me where I need to go. Do I go this way? Do I go that way? Do I have to go back down to choose a new path to get to this place? But you had sales calls made on you during the pandemic. You had prospecting calls made. Hey, Doug, hey, Roger from Social Good Promotions, do you want to buy a t-shirt? People got testy during the pandemic when it came to general sales activity because they were just doing their job. And ultimately, for the person who's trying to make the sale, the result is a transaction. When in reality, our job as salespeople is to build relationships. And because sales management does a poor job of having their salespeople recognize and appreciate what activities are necessary in the times when you're at differing levels of know, like, and trust with your prospects, it just feels like a transaction to the person on the other end of it. And if you did a better job of recognizing and appreciating that the first thing that we need to do in every interaction that we have with a client or a prospect is to recognize, where are we in that continuum at this moment? Is it weak? Is it mild? Is it strong? Or are you my family kind of people? And during the pandemic, generally speaking, the only purchases that got made were with people who you considered family.
Right.
Because everything else was so risky that you would not want to, I'm not going to take a risk right now because it's a risky time. So only with those people that I have the highest amount of trust will I even consider doing something with. And I think what many of us recognized and appreciated during the pandemic was we hadn't built really strong trust-based relationships with as many people as we needed to in order to sustain our businesses during things like, a pandemic.
Right.
So by doing activities that help train your team to recognize, where are you? And what should you be doing to help move yourself up that continuum, to me, is paramount. And if we could just do a better job of helping first line sales management recognize and appreciate that that's skill development that you need to be working on with your team, I think it would help close ratios in ways that people don't recognize today. Because, Doug, I don't know if you know this. Do you know what universally held close ratio is? As everyone agrees, there's a certain number of closes that you'll get out of 10, regardless of what you sell. Do you know what the number is?
Well, I will tell you what people tell me all the time, 20%.
20 to 25. All right. And so guess why that is?
Because somebody made it up.
Here's the thing, though. When you do all of the personality testing that we've all been taught, DISC, right, strength finders, whatever, generally speaking, there are 4 outcomes that are
1 in 4, 25%.
So really what ends up happening is the people who they're like, oh, Roger's kind of like me. I'm comfortable with him, so I'm going to choose him.
Right.
There's your close ratio. That's why. So if you've not done the work to build those trust relationships with the people who they don't feel comfortable with you, then that's why they don't ultimately choose you, because you're not like them.
Right.
And you've not given them any other reason to make that choice. So that's why. And then the second piece of this that I've historically seen happen is the majority of sales in any commodity-based industry happen at the end of the quarter and at the end of the year. And that's because we've trained people to wait until like, I know Roger's going to come with a deal for me because it's getting to be close to the end of the quarter.
End of the month. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And by doing these trust-based activities, you actually sort of knock down some of those walls and improve your close ratios as a result.
So there's so much to unpack there. I'm going to do my best. So firstly, know, like, and trust. I agree 100%. Building rapport. You never know where you are in the cycle. And those of you who are selling larger, more complex sales, I would say it's not even a necessity anymore. It is a must.
Mm-hmm. Imperative.
Because a lot of the CEOs and things that I speak with and people I speak with on the ownership level, the CEO level, on larger, more complex sales, if I ask them this question, how do you want to be sold to? They go, I don't want to be sold to, I want to buy. And so we all want to buy from that person we know, like, and trust. Number two, since you never know where you are completely on that continuum, and it is a stair-step process, I would agree with you. When selling, if they want to go to the close, don't try to run through the whole process. I have seen people do this over and over, Roger. It blows my mind. It's like, they just told you 3 times, give them the paper, electronic paper or real paper, and you keep going back to, let's talk about the fish on the wall. And it's like, no, they're beyond that. I think there's so much to unpack there. I mean, building strong relationships is a foundation. And I agree with you, with the pandemic, it's been a shift. In fact, on commoditization, if people, like you said, people wait to the end of the quarter, end of the month, right? I'm doing the same. I'm doing that right now with 2 vehicles. I got 2 lease vehicles coming up. I'm buying. I will go in there on the 30th of the month or the 31st of the month.
Yep.
Because I know, the same thing you said. So, but why wouldn't we do that? This is a crazy story. I have a dealership that I bought a vehicle from 2 years ago. And I told the sales guy, I like you a lot. Stay in touch with me. The man has never stayed in touch with me. Right. So I like the dealership so much that I call them back. Hey, I'm buying another vehicle. It's been 2 years since I bought, these other vehicles. Stay in touch with me. No, stay in touch with me. I just called them 4 days ago because I'm ready to go. And they said, I'll send you out this information on email that you're looking for. And they never did. And they never followed up and called me. So what happens there? That know, like, and trust now starts becoming, I don't like you as much. I don't trust you as much, and I certainly don't respect you as much. So now they're no longer that supercharged, amazing relationship, which if they just called me up with pricing and said, hey, this is what it is, I'd be up there signing 2 cars. Right. So I think with the pandemic, what's happened, and I agree with you, and all of you listening, I'm leaning in here. So, because listen up, because sales has shifted, it's changed. And if you don't build this know, like, and trust, as Roger is saying, then what's going to happen is you become a commodity. And who do you go to in a commodity? The most convenient or the most price available purchase.
Yep.
So like right now, Roger, like on most items right now, I don't know if you're doing this, but when I need something, I don't even go shop for it anymore. I used to buy from like office supplies from Staples and Office, Depot and Office Max. I buy from Amazon now.
Right.
Because I might order it today and it arrives by 4:00 in the afternoon.
Right.
Because that ream of paper or that box of, whatever, it's the same in all locations. And when I go to Office Depot or Staples, sometimes it's just like, well, I got to fight traffic. And then I get an attitude, if you will, an attitude from the people that are working there because they don't want to be working there anyways. Right. So it's kind of like, it's like, I just commoditize it all and just buy from Amazon. So now Amazon becomes, what they wanted to become anyways, a world dominator. And am I unlike a lot of people or a lot of people in your opinion doing the same type of thing?
Yeah. Well, so what you're talking about is friction, right? So friction in the transaction. If you're not the low cost provider and you create a lot of friction in the transaction, the likelihood of people saying, I want to pay you extra and make you make my life miserable.
Yeah.
Pretty unlikely, right? So we know I mean, you can buy branded pens on the internet. You don't need me. I know that. But I also know that every owner has a closet with some stuff that they bought that didn't work, that wasn't effective. And it was because you and your own creativity are not as creative as we are with the same product. So we and our expertise is what would be the reason you would choose the friction, because there's an easier way to do it. There's a less expensive way to do it, but the consequence of that choice is what ends up in the closet. And our whole job, literally, like if you watch any of my social media, what you'll see is like, we're saying, we don't want you to buy things that are going to end up in the garbage, because that's bad for the planet. It's bad for you. It's bad for you shouldn't do that. It's just not a good idea. So come to us so that we can devise a strategy that when you go and use the product, it actually will be effective. And that means that the product gets in the hands of the people that you want it to be in their hands. It has a narrative attached to it that makes it something that that person would want to hold on to, because now you've given them a piece of your brand for them to carry around and be reminded of you. And if you've done that in a thoughtful and creative kind of way, it immediately sets you apart from the other competitors in what you do, in a way that when that person comes to making the purchase decision, maybe they're like, oh, you know what? I do need some pens. And yeah, I could buy those online, but let me call Roger, because he's made me feel like that doing that would be better than just going and doing the easier thing. And isn't that really what we're trying to accomplish, regardless of what it is you're selling? Is when that moment happens, when the purchase decision is going to get made, that's when you want the person thinking about you.
Right.
And if you haven't done the work up until that point to be on the top of their mind when they're making that purchase decision, then you have put your sales force at a disadvantage.
And the reality is that, let's go back to made up stats again, right? 1 out of 4. Firstly, I've got to say my personal opinion is those type of assessments for sales in general are really not that predictable. They're personality assessments, really, when they come down. It doesn't tell you if the person can sell. Yeah. So, but that's a pet peeve of mine, that people use those type of assessments and go, oh yeah, I did a, strength finder, and look, yeah, Myers-Briggs. I'm a XYZA, whatever. Right. Not that I'm using the appropriate terminology, but I don't want them to sue me. So the reality is that having this top of mind awareness is what a lot of people miss out on, and they miss out on sales. Like, I'm a big proponent of follow-up. Why? It's doing the same thing or very similar thing in a different way. It's keeping top of mind awareness. That person who followed, like car dealer, if they had followed up with me, I don't know, 6 times, put me on a creative something and just said, hey, Doug, how you doing? Right. Then they would have got 2 additional sales, maybe 3, because my wife's looking for something new too. So the reality is that having a promotional piece that's sitting on someone's desk that has your information branded on that is a really good thing. Mm-hmm. And because I think it was Marketo or HubSpot, somebody did an online leads, and they were saying that only about 20% of the leads that come in will actually close in the first 30 days.
Right.
But I believe the number was 66% will close over a year.
Okay.
If you stay in touch.
Sure.
Right. So that pen, if you're talking about it, and by the way, Roger, this just happened to us yesterday. So we got a nice check in, and we're like, well, we got to put it in the bank, and we're trying to switch one bank to another bank. And so I'm like, I'll put it in this other bank, to start showing good faith to the bank, blah, blah. And my wife goes, but I love these pens from the bank we're in. And she pulls one out of her pocketbook and she goes, this one right here. I love this pen. Let's go there so I can get some more pens. I'm like, okay, we're making a buy. But I know what's going on, right? I mean, they have done exactly what you said to do. And that transition now has resulted in them getting the sizable check put into their bank account versus, versus the other company. So that's kind of human nature for us to do this. because we want to go with the familiarity, the know, like, and trust. She likes the pens. She trusts the pens. It's reliable. It writes every single time. I don't know. Maybe she respects the pen. I don't know. I'll have to ask her that question. But the reality is everything you're saying is spot on. If you could leave the audience with like one more nugget of gold, if you will, I'm putting you on the spot, obviously, but I know you can handle it. What would you leave them outside competitive differentiation, outside of, continuous top of mind awareness? What would be one more thing that they really should be thinking about?
Yeah. So we're a 2-person operation, right? So I'm doing multiple jobs. So I'm the sales leader. I run the marketing for the organization. I'm responsible for our philanthropic relationships. So much that goes into what makes our brand what it is doesn't happen unless the two of us are dedicated to making sure that the narrative that we've created around our brand is something that can survive investigation. And the way that that investigation survival technique is manifested is through what you read and see about us when you go to do whatever research you would do about whatever brand that you're considering, right? So we're going to go to our Googler, we're going to type in Roger Burnett or Social Good Promotions or whatever it is that you're trying to figure out about what you just heard from me. And if what you see and hear from me online is not a reflection of what you just heard in this conversation, it's going to create some dissonance for you. You'd be like, man, Roger really got me excited about maybe doing business with him, but then I went out online and nothing about what I saw there was a reflection of what I heard.
Yep.
Now I'm less likely because is he a snake oil guy? Is this not legit? Why is that happening? And we started the company in 2019, but if you look at what I'd been writing about, the foundational principles of our business really can be found in what I wrote online, dating all the way back to 2014. I've been talking about all of these things in what I was talking about long before I decided to turn it into a business model. So we are greatly aligned when it comes to what you see from us, what you hear from us, what you can find of us when you investigate. If you're not investing the time and the energy and the effort to make that be the case, then you are running a giant risk. And especially in this cancel culture kind of environment where people are itching for a chance to prove to the world that what you said is. So if you don't have dedicated activity built into what you do around making your message resonate in the marketplace, then you're missing out. And it's important for you to do, especially because you could unsell yourself to someone really easily when you don't do that activity. And secondarily, let's assume we're at decision moment, right? So that person is ready to make a buying decision and there's 1 or 2 or 3 competitors that they're choosing between. There's usually going to be that last moment of review where they're going to go back out one more time and say, all right, I really got to decide. And it's going to be in that last review that they're going to make their decision. And if you don't have what needs to be there to make them choose you in that moment, you're going to probably get beat by somebody who did. So there's a piece that I wrote years ago on the blog that talks about the difference between being persuasive and being compelling. And what I would tell you is persuasion has largely been the strategy for most salespeople throughout history, and persuasion costs you margin. It's the same thing we're talking about with you in the cars. You know you're going to wait because you know that that person is going to need your sale at that moment, and they're going to make a concession to help get you across the finish line in the time frame that they've created for themselves, because it's not your timeline, it's theirs. Being compelling is kind of like if I go to my doctor for a checkup and he says, hey, I see something weird. I need to send you to a specialist. Okay, the urgency around what's going to happen has grown because I'm worried that something is not right with me. When I go to the specialist, am I saying so specialist, hey doc, how much is this going to cost me? Like, how much of my insurance is going to cover this? No, like I have a spot on my lung and you're a lung specialist. Let's get to getting. But that person had to make an investment too in time, energy, effort, all of the things that go into becoming a specialist, to the point that when I seek your specialty, I'm not worried about price. So if you're not investing in being seen as the specialist, then really what you're doing is you're relying on persuasion to get you to your finish line, and it's going to cost you money. And I'm not saying being compelling isn't expensive. It is, but it's expensive in the time you have to invest in becoming an expert, and then the effort that you have to expend in communicating your expertise to the people who might want to see you as the expert when the time comes for them to make that purchase decision. So do you want to be persuasive or do you want to be compelling? I choose compelling. And it's all of the work that I've put in, the book we wrote, presentations that we give that are online for people to see, to say like, no, I'm a compelling choice. And when we get to the compelling choice, I'm not having a conversation with you about how expensive it is. And I know that like some people will be cynical salespeople and go, but as someone who sells pens that can be bought online, that you don't need me. The reason why people choose us is we are seen as a compelling choice. And to me, it's the single most important thing that any business needs to do, is to be seen as the compelling choice. And it's super hard to do, but it is the most important activity that any business can do for its sales organization, is to make you be seen as the compelling choice.
I think that was better than even all the other stuff we talked about when it really comes out. Because when you were talking, there's so many situations going through my head where it's like, oh my gosh, I could tell this story about this or that. And it doesn't matter if it's B2C, B2B.
No.
I have seen deals unravel last moment on B2B at the table because someone brings in a piece of information and goes, look, it's not really congruent with what they're telling us.
Yep.
And B2C, the same thing. The first thing that came to my mind was I was looking for a new home. And so I looked up on, I think it was realtor.com or one of the sites. And I'm like, oh, don't know the area. So I'll take this real estate agent. She looked, very qualified. And I remember her picture was very nice, appealing. And the way she presented herself was like, hey, I sell professional homes, right? That type of thing. And that's what I was looking for. And I show up at the meeting, and the picture that was there and the woman that showed up was about 25 or 30 years difference.
Got it.
She was about in her, I'd say mid 50s, but her picture was in her probably her early 30s, if not 20s. So I was questioning, is this the same person?
Right.
She showed up in a convertible Mustang, Ford Mustang, versus the automobile that she was showing in her profile. And right then and there, the sale was over.
Yeah.
Because firstly, if you've ever been in a convertible Mustang, they're great unless you have to sit in the back seat.
Right.
So if you want to cut your knees off and, from the legs down, you can fit into these vehicles. So it wasn't really a congruent thing. And, and I've showed up at certain hotels that are rated as 4 or 5 star, and they're dilapidated.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that all of a sudden it's like, I'm not buying the car. I'm not staying at this hotel. I'm not doing this, multi-million-dollar deal because we just, found out some other information. And I agree with you too, Roger. By the way, people will look. The majority of sales decisions on large sales, especially, are done before you even enter the room.
Yes.
So it's kind of one of those things that if you're not congruent, if you're not in the public square, like you said, by the way, where's the blog? Like your blog?
It's called The Burn, and I post it via my LinkedIn channel. So you can pick it up there.
Okay, cool. So check out The Burn, folks. Roger, I want to plug your you have a podcast too, because I've listened a lot to your podcast. It's awesome. What is the podcast? I know what it is, but you tell me.
Yeah. So You're in Sales podcast is 5 years old now, and we're on episode 126. And it really just delves into what does it take to be a really successful salesperson in the world today. It's not like what it used to be. And My sales career predates the internet. So I've been at this for a really long time, and I'm a student of now that what you just said is so completely true. The role of the salesperson has moved so far down funnel. We used to be the place that people would come for information to make a decision. They've largely made their choice by the time they've gotten to you, and your job is to just steward them the rest of the way. And all of the work that we talked about being compelling is what you need to have invested to make that happen, so that when they show up, they already have kind of made up their mind. So you're in sales really examines some of the mechanics on trying to do that well.
Cool. Well, Roger, I'm going to thank you for being here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Folks, check him out. We'll have all the information in the show notes. He is the real deal. We've had numerous conversations over the past, so appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man, it was fun. Appreciate it.
All right. Wasn't that cool? What do you think? So Roger's a really smart guy. And, I was thinking about it. He's got a smaller company, but it doesn't mean a smaller company is a bad thing, right? Really, when you come down to it, because when you have smaller companies, then smaller companies will tend to pay attention to you far more than if you're just this big, huge conglomerate of companies that doesn't have their marketing differentiation together, doesn't have it working through the whole, process about, they're trying to sell on persuasiveness versus being compelling. And quite frankly, the real question is, would you rather be the valued asset in a process that you're buying from? In other words, they want you, they need you, they will do everything they can to promote and have you as a client long-term, versus you being one of 10,000. And if they lose you, oh, so what? They gain 2 today, lose 1 today, they're up 1. That's how some of the companies look at it. When it comes to marketing differentiation, it's no longer I think we should do this. It's a must today. And you must be out in the public square, and you must be promoting and putting yourself out there congruently, because people will look you up when it comes to you selling to them. And if they find incongruencies, here's the sad part. They don't always tell you. It's one of those things, right? But they make the decision off that. They make the judgment call. For example, if you're trying to hire A-player salespeople and you're not looking at Glassdoor ratings or your online reputation, believe me, these A-type players, they're going to look it up first, and they will make the decision based on whether or not that's favorable or not. So anyways, this is Doug C. Brown bringing you another episode of the CEO Sales Strategy podcast. If you like this, I ask you all the time, please go up and rate this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, and tell your friends about it, because the more people we have, the more eyeballs that we get on and more people we help. If you need help in your own business, you want anything around growing your revenues, you want to hire top producing salespeople, you want to get yourself to the top 1% of sales globally, reach out to me at Doug Brown 1234. That is the LinkedIn, or Doug at ceosalesstrategies.com. And as always, if you have a topic of interest that you want to find and source people and bring that to you, let us know what it is. We'll be happy to do it. Until next time, go out, sell a lot of stuff, sell it profitably, and make a ton of money and help a lot of people.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success,